Welcome to Target Market Insights, the Multifamily and Marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this show, do me one huge favor. Leave us that 5-star rating and review. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Megan Greathouse. Megan Greathouse is a St. Louis-based entrepreneur working toward financial independence while raising 2 young children. Megan's primary path to FI is buy and hold rental properties, but she is fascinated with learning about and experimenting with all sorts of passive income streams. Let's welcome to the show, Megan Greathouse.
Hey, how's it going, John? Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Megan, you are based out in St. Louis. It's really good to talk to you. We met a few years ago, and I've been really happy to watch just the growth and projections that you've had. For our listeners who are not familiar with you, why don't you take a minute and give us a little bit more background?
Sure. Yeah. So Megan Greathouse, like you said, I live in St. Louis. I was actually a military kid growing up, so never lived anywhere but the coasts. And then I went to school here in St. Louis and decided to join up the Marine Corps myself. So I did 4 years active duty and a couple years reserve work, and came out as a captain and went to get my MBA with the GI Bill. And that MBA led to a great high paying job. And my husband and I, through all of this, were big savers and investors. And we always kind of had this interest in real estate. But then it was having my daughter in 2016 that really got me, kind of lit the fire under me to look into passive or semi-passive income streams more closely, because I wanted more time with her. I had this beautiful little girl who was just so much fun and would crack me up, and I missed her every time I was away from her. So I started really diving in, and I would, get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to work on it before she woke up and before I had to go to work, or I'd do it during her naps on the weekends. We built this small but mighty rental portfolio here in St. Louis and got to the point where we felt like I could comfortably leave work. We weren't going to live off of the real estate income. We wanted to keep reinvesting that, but we had enough going where I could leave my job, spend more time with our daughter and then our son, who has since joined us, and continue to kind of build semi-passive or passive income streams for us along the way. And my husband has continued to work his 9 to 5 thus far, but we're hoping that might also end in the not too distant future. So that's where we are. We're really about the lifestyle business going here, and spending more time with our kids and just kind of taking advantage of all the experiences that we can.
Well, I mean, we hear a lot about financial independence, right? And I think one of the things is that, it's great to be able to quit your job. And a lot of people tend to focus on quitting your job for whatever reason. And it's great, but there's a reason you want to leave. There are other things you want to do with that time that you're investing in a W-2 job right now. You mentioned having your daughter really opened up your eyes to the need and desire to spend more time at home, more time with your daughter. Was there anything in particular where you just looked at how your life was going, your days were going, where you decided, you know what, enough's enough. I need to make a change. I need to make this happen now?
I think one of the biggest things for me, oddly enough, was always when she got sick. And it felt like this, it felt so difficult to rearrange all of the corporate meetings, to, tell my bosses. And you always, even though I had really great and supportive bosses in my company, you always have to feel like apologetic about your kid being sick. And that just felt weird to me. And it was just this feeling of not having quite the level of flexibility and freedom I wanted. And, we talk about quitting our jobs. Yes. My husband and I are not the type who, especially me, who can actually just sit around and not do anything. So, people may have heard the term FIRE, financial independence, retire early. There are some alts to that. And I think the one that we love and embrace is the financial independence, retire entrepreneur. So it's not really that we don't want to work. It's that we want more flexibility. It's that we want to build things that are kind of our own, and that can scale much more massively than a W-2 income ever can. So yeah, that freedom and flexibility and not having to apologize to anybody when our kids are sick or when we want to take off to see a school play or whatever, that was a big fire starter under us. And it's leading us down a road more of entrepreneurship than just, retiring early.
No, I love that too, because I mean, the point for you is not that you're just trying to kick your feet up and rest and say, hey, I've made enough money to take care of myself. I'm good. You are still being entrepreneurial. You're still looking at ways to make money, to invest and to keep yourselves busy, but you want the flexibility to control your time. And that's the one thing that we just don't get back. And it's the most precious asset any of us have is our time. So if we can spend more of that time with our little ones, especially for any parent with young children, they can relate to that, I'm a parent of a 6 and a 4-year old, so I completely understand where you're coming from with that need and that want to spend more time with your family. Let's talk a little about some of the rental portfolio that you've built and kind of your multifamily investing right now. I know that you also are hosting the Multifamily Mavericks podcast. So talk to us a little bit about that portfolio, and how you kind of scaled that.
Yeah, I mean, our portfolio buildup has been pretty slow and steady, but like I said, it's kind of small but mighty. 10 units here in St. Louis across small multifamily, so 2 to 4 family buildings, which we dabbled a little bit in a couple single families. We bought one that was a rental, and then eventually kind of turned that into a long flip. We did flip another one, so we've had a couple other things we've done in real estate, but that multifamily model where you kind of have some redundancies of rent built in is really nice. And we like that. But I'm also the type who, again, I'm here for the lifestyle. I don't necessarily want to be chasing down deals so that I can be closing on something every single month. I want a little more wiggle room in my life for other things as well. So that has led me to look at scaling up into larger buildings and going true, commercial multifamily. Ideally, my next building will be 16 units or more. 16 to kind of 24 or 30 units is what I'm targeting right now, because I want to be able to, in one transaction, double, triple my portfolio and continue to really build without, again, chasing deals every single month trying to close something. So our 10 units that we do have, we built them, I would say, pretty well. They were in solid areas. I kind of always look for areas where I feel like if something really went wrong, if we had to sell our own home because things weren't going well, we could go live in one of those and be totally happy. So they're not, A, but they're solid B neighborhoods. We've been able to renovate them and increase rents quite a bit. I mean, I've doubled rents in a couple of these places because of the renovations and the value add that we did. So I do like the value add model, and I like multifamily, and I'm just looking to continue at a larger scale going forward.
Yeah, so I heard you say that, you focus on more B class areas where not necessarily the most luxurious neighborhoods, but places where you would have no problem living yourself. That makes it easier to attract the quality resident who, especially someone maybe who's a little bit early in their life stage, who's still renting and maybe working up to that first home purchase. But then also finding those value add opportunities where you can go in, make some improvements, add some value to the property, and increase rents, increase the overall value. And now you've got some flexibility with maybe tapping into that equity or rolling that over into another property, or just leaving it there and just knowing that, hey, we've created some value here and this is something that continues to grow in the future. You also talked about scaling and going from, okay, you've got your 10 unit portfolio, now looking at maybe getting a 16, 20, or 30 unit property, just so you have more doors in one location, making the closing process easier. As you think about scaling, you didn't talk about getting 1,000 doors or 5,000 doors, right? And there are some people who focus on the door count, and I think that it's just not relevant to anything as far as the door count, versus focusing on what you're able to create. And as you talk about the lifestyle, going back to that and the time that you're spending closing on properties, talk to me a little bit more just strategically about how you plan on scaling while still balancing the lifestyle you're looking to create for your family.
Yeah, so this is a very purposeful and intentional decision that I've made. And it can be hard because I'm somewhat competitive. I'll go ahead and admit that. And, I'm pretty active in real estate in terms of networking. I'm on social media, and I, share a lot with other people on social media. I share on Bigger Pockets. So you do see a lot of those folks out there who are just scaling so quickly, doing so much. And I look at that sometimes and I think, gosh, am I being silly here? Not going for more? But I keep coming back to the why behind it, because owning real estate just for the sake of owning real estate, it is very cool. I do have a passion for real estate, but that alone isn't what's going to cut it for me. It is the family and the lifestyle. I enjoy, time with my kids. We enjoy spending time outdoors and camping. I really love travel. I grew up living abroad for several years, and I love travel. And all of these things are things that I want to make sure I'm making more room for in my life, not less, as I go. So yeah, I am very focused on trying to, you always kind of have to keep your eyes open and keep that deal funnel somewhat going. But I really try to focus on what is that next building. I'm not looking to get 4 things under contract at the same time. I'm not trying to scale from 10 to 300 in the next 2 years. I'm keeping it intentional and focused so that I can keep focusing on my kids, especially right now, because my children are 4 and 1. So right now I actually have some extra days with them per week. They have childcare 3 days per week, and I get 4 days per week where I mostly focus on them. I might, answer a text message or an email, but other than that, I'm trying to focus on my kids on those days. In a few years, they will be in school, and that won't be an option anymore. Monday through Friday, for whatever it is, 8 or 9 months out of the year, they're going to be in school. And at that point, I could see us, starting to push a little bit more in what we're doing and in what I'm searching for and how often I want to buy new deals and how big I want to go. But I'm trying to plan all of this around my family and the stage we're at. And right now we're at a stage where I can have a little extra time with them. So I'm okay sacrificing some growth in the short term for that.
No, I love it. And I think that clarity of your purpose is so key. A lot of people get into real estate or want to get into real estate, but they're not clear on their why. And that why gives you clarity, because there's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. You can flip houses, you can wholesale, you can syndicate, you can buy small multifamily. There are a lot of strategies, and a lot of them, they all work, right? It's just a matter of understanding the nuances of them. But what you really want to do is figure out what works for you, what helps you get to the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And for you, at least for the next few years, it's focusing on your family and kind of using a real estate portfolio to help supplement that, right? And building with that in mind. As you go from, where you're at today, or, as you look to transition, is there a skill set or something in particular that you've identified that you're going to need to do differently than maybe what you've done up to this point?
Yeah, I absolutely think being willing to partner and delegate on more and more is going to be really important going forward. And that's something that early on I was doing a lot myself. I did actually have property management for a while, and then I eventually took it over. But I was always managing the managers, and I was, analyzing all the deals myself. I would, have my husband look at things right before we made an offer. But this has primarily been my project, my baby. So I kind of did everything myself. And lately, especially as I look to go larger, I've been more open to potential partnerships. In the past, I thought, when I make mistakes, I want them to be my mistakes and my dollars. I feel like I've gotten to a point now where I've got a little experience, so that helps me feel more confident in partnering. And also where I fully recognize the things I'm good at and not good at in real estate. And I have a clearer picture of the type of people that I need to fill in my gaps. So I'm open to partnerships. And, talking with folks who want to bring money to the table, their, existing prior relationships. So it'd be, maybe 1 or 2 people per deal. But there's a lot that I can do without overwhelming myself, but also getting bigger if I'm willing to partner and maybe even bring on some part-time to help in the future. And I'm a type A person who's very detail oriented, so that can be hard for me to do. But yeah, I 100% recognize that that's something I need to be working on and getting more and more comfortable with as I go forward.
Well, I think that's the biggest difference between multifamily and, let's call it the single family or residential real estate, is it truly is a team sport. You get into the commercial real estate space, especially when you're talking double digit unit counts. And at that point, there are multiple people. Even if you want to self-manage, if you get a couple of properties, you now may have a full-time job, right? So if you are getting into this and you have that clarity that you're doing this to have more free time with your family, you don't want to sign up for a new job. So having those partners and finding ways to scale where you can put the systems in place, the teams in place, as well as the protocols and processes, that's going to make your life a little bit easier. And I would say the same thing, as I'm listening to you talk, it's very similar to where I was a few years ago, where we had built up a 13 unit portfolio and, we had an 8 unit commercial property and we were ready to scale and start working with other investors. But we did all those 13 units ourselves. And I realized the same thing that, hey, you know what, the time I'm taking now, the money we're investing, like there has to be a more efficient way of doing this in a way that actually helps other people versus, me just trying to figure it all out by myself. So I think that if you can open yourself up to at least the idea of partnerships as opposed to trying to just one man show it, if you can open yourself up to the concept and start talking to people, networking and figuring out what's the best strategy for you, it makes it much easier to scale and to see opportunities that otherwise may not have presented themselves. So thank you for sharing that information. Let's talk a little bit about St. Louis. All right. So
Yeah.
what are you seeing in the St. Louis market today?
Man, it's I've focused primarily in the St. Louis market. Every once in a while I've kind of out of curiosity looked at other markets, but I haven't done anything in other markets. So, I can't compare in a lot of detail. But St. Louis, I would say, is still a cash flow market for the most part, but I would say it's also pretty surprisingly competitive for a Midwest quote unquote flyover state and area. Just in general, real estate has been doing well for a while. It's been kind of on generally this upward trajectory. We've seen rent growth, we've seen prices growing. Even with COVID, the market has still stayed pretty hot. And it's hard to find things. I'm watching the MLS. I'm networking with a lot of different agents and brokers and other investors. I am doing direct mail. And it's been a good solid couple of months of not quite finding anything that works. So I do think St. Louis has a lot of great potential. It's got cash flowing properties. It's got properties that compared to so many areas in the US are really affordable. But you still have to make the numbers work. The properties are affordable, but so are the rents. There's a connection there. And we also are seeing a lot of money coming from the coasts and from out of the country, honestly. I mean, there are people who are coming in and willing to pay cash for a lot of these properties and kind of park money somewhere rather than worry too much about cash flow. So, of course, that creates a situation where a cash flow investor has to work that much harder to find a property that makes sense for them. One other thing I will point out about St. Louis, and it's something I'm always kind of watching, we don't have big population growth right now. We've been pretty stagnant for a little while. The good news is we haven't seen things completely fall off. If you look at certain areas like St. Louis City itself versus the county, they're actually two separate governments, which makes some of the data kind of tricky sometimes. The city has lost some population, but the county has grown some population. And so overall, the MSA, I would say, is fairly stable. But we're hoping for a return to growth. And we're seeing a lot of things in terms of the investment in the area and the industry in the area and what some of those industries are doing that suggests that we could get back to growth, but it's not there yet. So that's something I'm always kind of watching and aware of, because in my head, I'm also thinking, okay, I'm still focused. I'm staying focused on St. Louis, but in 1 or 2 or 3 years, I'm going to be interested in some diversification as well, because St. Louis isn't showing the population growth that some other markets could. And that's something that I think you really need to think about. Population growth, employment growth, employer growth. There's not as much of that in St. Louis right now.
Yeah, and that's one of those things too with the Midwest. I think a lot of times people get caught up in just the big population growth, and that's a very important metric. But that doesn't mean there aren't great investment opportunities in other markets like St. Louis. And as I think about St. Louis, and it's very similar to some of the other Midwest cities. I mean, I'm from Cleveland, and I think that there's a lot of similarities there to the market. But as you think about St. Louis, and you think about kind of where the population, the job growth, as you mentioned, somewhat stagnant, but the county is growing, is what you said. How do you balance that, and then how does that influence where you look for deals? Are you looking more outside of the St. Louis, proper, and looking more in the county, or how does that change your investment strategy?
I'm continuing to look both in the city and the county for a couple of reasons. The county, I would love to invest in. I still am not finding numbers that really work for me out there. The city, there are a lot of folks who enjoy living in the city, even if they're commuting to the county. for work. And a lot of our big employers still are in the city, or at least I'll say a handful of them. So, the city definitely, there are pockets of the city that have driven most of the population decline that you see. There are other pockets of the city, the areas that I really like to focus on, that are these solid B areas. And a lot of young professionals like to live there, young families, kids who are going to school or graduate school. Those neighborhoods are solid and they're hot, even though overall the city is showing a population decline. So it really gets down to knowing not just the market overall, but the specific neighborhoods and the specific streets. I mean, you've got to get pretty targeted. Early on, I would I would make my husband plan any dates we had around what areas I wanted to get to know as a market. So we would go to, Southtown Pub in Northampton because there's a property around the corner that I was interested in. Or we went to a brewery one time on Cherokee Street because the Cherokee district is kind of transitional but showing growth, and we ended up buying a property out there. So, you just got to spend time with them and get to know those micro markets, because I think that really, really helps.
Man, that's a powerful insight right there. And I know some folks may laugh, but I mean, finding ways to spend time in different neighborhoods. I mean, there's no better way than going out, grabbing a bite to eat, or, checking out whatever the area has to offer. So, maybe getting coffee or something like that, but actually spend some time in there and figure out, the vibe of an area, what kind of people are, living there, what's happening with the location, is it changing? And I really love that insight because, when we started to show, a lot of this was really based on how to find the best places to invest with things you're talking about, right? So you live in St. Louis, that's great, but it's still a huge city. How do you find those micro neighborhoods where there is that energy that's taking place outside of just asking random people on the internet, right? So by going out there, doing date night in some of these different neighborhoods and checking it out yourself, you get a better sense of the vibe, the quality of life, and what people are looking for. Give me a couple of neighborhoods in St. Louis that kind of rise up as you've done that research, or places that you have on your radar. Where are some of the places that have the path of progress, or really seeing more investment and people looking to live there?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the ones that have been solid for a while are places like Northampton, Southampton, The Hill. Dogtown is one that I love. My latest duplex was in Dogtown, and it was funny. I was 8 months pregnant and on a mission. I was like, I want a place in Dogtown before I have this kid, and we made it happen. So that's a great one. It's right across from Forest Park, which for those of you who don't know, I didn't actually know this at first, is larger than New York City's Central Park and has a ton of free attractions in it. I mean, it's a major attraction point in St. Louis. It's borders all the hospitals that we have in the area. So people who are in the medical field at all are interested in the area. And then there are a lot of places that I would say are more transitional, but on the rise. So as you get further east into the city, there are pockets that you see a lot of growth happening. So this Cherokee district, and it's called Benton Park or Benton Park West, right along Cherokee Street, where there's been a lot of just organic growth of businesses and lots of local businesses. So it's got this kind of, I almost don't want to use the term, but hipster vibe. There's a lot of interest in that area. And I think there's just a lot of these pockets in primarily South St. Louis City, where you're seeing growth happen over time. So I think a lot of it is, find the places where people want to hang out in the city. And then you start looking at the neighborhoods around it, and you compare crime maps versus commute times versus, how close you are to some of these attractions. And you start to kind of hone in on areas that are showing a lot of either are already solid, people want to live there, or they're on the outskirts of those solid places, and people are starting to move in there when they can't get into, the Northampton, Southampton. They might go to the neighborhood right next door, and that's solid too.
So that's a great insight right there, right? So finding the areas where there's already some demand, and if you can't, afford it from an investment standpoint, just based on the returns you're looking for, look at those adjacent communities. And you hit on three great things, looking at the crime maps, looking at the commute times, and then those attractions. Is there a park? Is there something there that's an anchor for a location? And if so, look at the crime map, look at the commute times, and that's a really good indicator that people are going to want to live there. And obviously, if there's a little bit of a hipster vibe, or you can call it to be more PC, there maybe there's a bit more of millennials or Gen Z moving into a location. But in general, you want to just look for those opportunities, and if you can find investments there. Now the market's going to do some of that work, and you just go in and make those units or those properties. You just update them so they can attract that higher quality resident who's going to pay a little bit more in rent. So great tactics there. I want to go back to kind of the lifestyle real quick. Going back to financial independence, because I said something previously on a different show. And at one point I said, I think that some people who pursue financial independence are being selfish because they're looking at it and they're basically saying, how do I work as little as possible and put my money to work so I can go out and travel and do all these different things? And the reason I said that was, there's an opportunity to create generational wealth and to create for family. And I think this all ties into upbringing. But for someone who didn't come from a lot, I think for me, it was very important to not just create enough money for me to be able to kick my feet up, but to try to give my kids' kids, a leg up. I'm not saying take care of everything, but to give them a chance to start not at zero, but maybe they're starting on first base, right? What's your take on that? How do you approach that? And are you doing this solely for yourself and for your time? Or do you look at this as either an opportunity or kind of a commitment to put your daughter and your son in a better position as well?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty aligned, and my husband and I are pretty aligned with your school of thought. I mean, while we aren't, trying to scale massively right now and go quick, but we are very interested in building. Like, building is a word that keeps coming up. We want to build something that's meaningful for our kids and hopefully their kids. And I also love the idea of, getting to a point where we could find some ways to give back to the community as a whole. I want to show my children how we do that and we give back in small ways right now, but I'd really like to scale that part as well. I would love to take what we know and contribute to financial literacy in America and contribute to, housing issues for children especially. And there are a lot of things that mean a lot to me that I could see building something bigger, not massive, but bigger, helping me to give back in those ways that just, they make me feel good. They help others. They teach my children valuable life lessons. So yeah, I'm definitely in the camp of build something that is bigger and greater than yourself so you can help others as well.
No, I love that. I love that. And as you think about the way you build, I know you talked about real estate is really one tool in your tool belt. It's not the only thing that you and your husband are doing right now. I know he has his W-2 job, but just out of curiosity, what are some of the different investments or, opportunities that you all are looking into right now?
Yeah, I mean, so we do have a lot of the traditional investments, and we tend to be fairly simple with how we handle those, a lot of index funds and things like that with our retirement accounts. But we do actually have interest in business building as well. And this is something that, my husband and I would both be involved in both business and real estate, but I could kind of continue to lead the way in business or in the real estate, and he might take the helm of a business. So we are interested in business as well. And right now we're in some early phases of looking into some of the options that might make sense to us. Whatever we build, again, we would want to be able to build it with the idea of being able to hand it off to somebody else for weeks at a time if we want to go take our kids abroad for a bit. So we're really approaching it with that in mind and trying to be careful about what we might get ourselves into. But yeah, I think they talk about all sorts of passive income streams, or I should say income streams in general, but real estate, intellectual property, stocks and bonds, businesses, all those things kind of come up over and over and over again. And we're always kind of looking at all of them and trying to decide, does this fit our picture long term? And I think building or buying a business might be in our not too distant future as well.
Yeah, investing in business is something that, is definitely coming up. I mean, obviously there are a lot of, e-commerce businesses that are there, but I am starting to have more and more conversations with other investors who have an interest in buying businesses as well. So something to look into and definitely keep on the radar as those opportunities emerge, especially as, we have older business owners, maybe someone who's ran a brick and mortar for the last 20, 30 years or so. And if they, they maybe had that generational wealth idea and they're going to hand it down to their kids, and kids like, I'm good, I don't want to run that business. So there may be some opportunities there. So certainly another avenue to keep your eye on. Before we transition to our bullseye round, I have to ask you about Multifamily Mavericks. So I want to know a little bit more about why you started this show, co-hosting this show, as well as who is this audience? Who's the audience that really benefits from checking out this podcast?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So Multifamily Mavericks is a new podcast. We just launched it in August 2020, if you're listening to this in the future. And it's myself and Josiah Smelser. And he and I were introduced by a mutual acquaintance. And the funny thing is, in this day and age, it was all online, people that, we had been connecting with online for a while. But we had both been on the Bigger Pockets podcast kind of within a month of each other, I think. And there were things about our stories that were quite similar. We both had these kind of smaller portfolios of 1 to 4 families, and we both talked about wanting to take that kind of leap and make the jump into something bigger. So we were connected by a mutual acquaintance, and Josiah had this idea to start a podcast targeted at people going through the same thing as us. So maybe you don't have much property yet, or maybe you have some property, but it's all in that 1 to 4 family space. What got you there here won't get you there. There's going to be some differences. A lot of it still pertains, but there's going to be some changes, some different ways of thinking, some different ways of financing or partnering to get you to some of those larger buildings. So what's it really take? And we wanted to explore that in depth with these weekly podcasts. It would give us a chance to talk to a lot of smart folks who are investing in multifamily, like John Kasman, who we recently had on our podcast, and help us to kind of share our journey along the way as we scale up and hopefully empower others to do the same. So if you're kind of in that spot that Josiah and I are, you've got a few small multifamily properties or single families, or maybe you don't have anything yet, but you want to kind of start in an 8 or 12 unit instead of a 2 family, we're probably a podcast that you could learn something from.
There you go. Let's check it out. It's Multifamily Mavericks. I really enjoyed being on the show, and I can't wait to check out the final product of that episode. And Megan, you're obviously a great co-host on the show, and certainly a great guest on this show as well. Let's move on to our bullseye round. You ready?
Let's do it.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
All right, so I'm going to take it back to my military time then. When I was going to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps, I got injured not once, but twice going through the summer programs. So the way these things work is you go out, you spend your whole summer when all your friends are, having fun, going to the beach or whatever, and you go train at officer candidate school in Quantico, Virginia. And you've got to get through a pretty rigorous program for 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the setup. And twice in a row, I got injured, had to get sent back home early, and that meant I was going to have to go do it again the next summer. So I did 3 summers at officer candidate school to become a Marine, and there are a lot of times where I was like, should I even do this? Why do I keep getting injured? What's wrong with me? Maybe I'm just not cut out for it. But I think the fact that I kept going back until I made it made a lasting impression on myself and some of the people around me too. After that point, I never really doubted whether I could make something work. The how might be in question, but can I do it? I'm pretty sure I can do it at some point. I just got to keep going for it.
No, I love that. Love that. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
So, I self-manage, and I'm outsourcing parts of it and pieces of it, but I use Tenant Cloud and online banking all the time to make sure I'm keeping everything running smoothly. And actually, I'm only at 10 units. It's not like I've got a portfolio of 100, but I don't spend a ton of time on management because the things that are time intensive, I farm out to others. So between those things, 2 apps or 2 online things, it streamlines so much of what I do.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Gosh, I like books. So there's probably a lot of them. I'm going to go with, because it's a pretty broad, anyone, real estate, business, otherwise would enjoy it. The Alchemist is one that I read early this year. And I think that's just a great one. It's much more of a story. It's pretty easy and quick to read. And it's just a great mindset book. And whether you're starting a business or getting into real estate or just trying to go after some goals that seem lofty and far out there, It helps you realize there are going to be setbacks. It's going to take a while, but you can get there.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Working out 100% every day that I can. It's a little hard right now with the 1-year-old. He's not quite as good at sleeping through the night as I'd like by now. But working out is my sanity check. It clears my head. It keeps me focused. Without it, I can tell on the days that I haven't worked out because my focus just isn't quite there.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
One thing I wish I knew. I wish I understood more fully. I wish I'd internalized the power of how real estate helps you build wealth. I think there are some deals I passed up on that actually probably were solid deals and would have just helped me continue to grow, overall in my net worth. We've been looking at it pretty closely recently, and it snuck up on us how some of these, handful of properties have really helped our net worth grow. I didn't think about the things outside of cash flow very much early on. I still would want to buy cash flowing properties, but I think there are a lot more pieces to the puzzle that up front it's hard to think about because it seems so far off, but it grows pretty quickly.
What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious about business. So we were talking about it earlier. I'm curious about, opening, owning, operating a business and how we can fit that into our family's overall puzzle for creating a free and flexible life without just saying no to work. We still want to be working on things that we enjoy and have fun with. So that's what I'm most curious about now.
All right, we've talked about St. Louis and we've talked about all the date nights that you and your husband spent checking out neighborhoods. Give me the best place to grab a bite in St. Louis.
Ooh, I really like international food, and we actually have quite a cool international food scene in St. Louis. There's a bunch of I'm going to go with Renouche. They've got really great, I think the owner is originally from Syria, and they have some amazing dishes there. And I mean, I'm not even a vegetarian, but I go there and I just eat all the vegetarian platters because they're so good.
Love it. Love it. And we've talked about the podcast. We've talked about, a lot of things that you're working on. First and foremost, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show. It's always great talking to you and hearing about all the great things that you're working on. For our listeners who want to get in touch, maybe learn a little bit more about you and your journey and what you've got working on now, what is the best way for them to get in touch? And then also let them know where they can find the Multifamily Mavericks podcast.
Yeah, so I am active on BiggerPockets, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I kind of follow my real estate and FI journey or post about it at Part-Time Empire. That's my Instagram handle. So any of those places are good places to reach out to me. And then Multifamily Mavericks, you can find it pretty much anywhere where you can find a podcast. So iTunes, Spotify, etc. We also have at Multifamily Mavericks Instagram account, so you can connect with us there, watch what we're doing. We try to do pretty much daily posts about kind of who we've been talking to and great tips that we've gotten from them.
Awesome. Megan, this has been a lot of fun, really insightful. Thank you for breaking down the St. Louis market and giving us some clarity on ways and little cheat sheets that we can use to find great places to invest. And then more than anything, I love your why, understanding the way you take that why, but then also implementing that with purpose and strategy so that as you're building this part-time empire, see what I did there? As you're building this part-time empire,
I like it.
you are focused on not losing the goal and what you began with in the first place. So really great information. I really appreciate this episode. Thank you for coming on Target Market Insights, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, John.